settle in, my friend. Tonight I want to tell you about a place I found once, many years ago. An inn where it rained and never stopped. A cozy place for travelers to rest and drink. But above all, taking shelter from the never-ending rain. I was traveling through a place called the Folded Valley, where the mountains tucked into each other and hid little pockets of forgotten land. I'd been walking for 3 days through grey drizzle when the real rain began, the kind that soaks through everything and makes you desperate for any shelter at all. I was hurrying along what barely passed for a path when I saw it through the downpour. A building. An inn by the look of it, though it seemed to emerge from the rain itself, as if the storm had decided to grow architecture. Warm light glowed in the windows, and smoke rose from the chimney, defying the rain to put it out. I've never trusted weather that lasts too long. It starts to think it owns the place, but I was far too wet to be philosophical about it, so I splashed through the mud to the door and pushed inside. The warmth hit me immediately. That particular kind of warmth that only exists in contrast to being thoroughly soaked. The common room was larger than the building had looked from outside, with a great stone fireplace at one end where logs burned cheerfully. The walls were dark wood, polished smooth by years of hands and shoulders brushing past. Candles flickered on tables, their light soft and golden, and it was quiet. Not empty. There were perhaps a dozen people scattered about the room, sitting alone or in pairs, but the quiet you find in libraries or temples, the kind that feels intentional. "Welcome, traveler," said a voice, and I turned to see the innkeeper approaching. He was a tall man, perhaps 60, with silver hair and eyes the color of deep water. He wore an apron that had once been white and carried himself with a kind of careful gentleness, as if he were made of something that might crack. "Thank you," I said, dripping spectacularly onto his floor. "I'm sorry about the puddle." "The rain brings everyone low," he said with a small smile. "Come, sit by the fire. I'll bring you something warm." He led me to a chair near the hearth and disappeared. I peeled off my cloak and held my hands toward the flames, feeling sensation return to my fingers in that painful, prickling way. Around me, the other guests sat absorbed in their own worlds. A woman by the window stared out at the rain. An old man at a corner table moved chess pieces across a board, playing against himself. 2 figures in traveling clothes sat across from each other, not speaking, just existing in each other's company. The innkeeper returned with a clay mug of something that steamed and smelled of honey and herbs and warmth. I wrapped my hands around it gratefully. "Terrible night," I said. "Yes," he agreed, "though no worse than any other here." I glanced at the window, where rain streamed down the glass in endless rivulets. "Does it rain often in this valley?" Something flickered across his face. Not quite pain, not quite resignation. Something older than both. "It rains always," he said quietly. "It hasn't stopped in a very long time." I looked at him more carefully then, with the part of my mind that notices things other people miss. There was something about him, about this place, that didn't quite fit together properly. The warmth was real, the fire was real, but there was a stillness underneath it all, like looking at a painting instead of a living scene. "How long?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment, looking into the fire. "Long enough that some of the guests have forgotten there was ever anything else. Long enough that the world outside has likely forgotten we're here." He met my eyes. "You should stay the night, wizard. The storm is fierce, and the path is treacherous in the dark. In the morning, you can continue on your way." He'd called me wizard, though I'd said nothing about what I was. But then, I supposed anyone who looked closely enough could see the marks of magic on a person. The way candlelight bends a little differently around us, the way our shadows don't always match our movements exactly. "I'll stay," I said. "Thank you." He nodded and turned to go, then paused. "If you hear singing in the night," he said, "don't be alarmed. It's only the rain." And then he was gone, moving between tables, checking on guests who barely seemed to see him, tidying things that were already tidy. I sat for a long while, sipping the warm drink and watching the fire. The rain continued its steady drumming on the roof, on the windows, on the stones outside. It was the kind of sound that should have been soothing, but instead it felt heavy, oppressive, like a weight pressing down on the world. After a time, I rose and wandered through the common room. The inn was surprisingly large inside, with hallways leading to guest rooms and what I presumed were kitchens and storage. Everything was clean, well maintained, timeless. It could have been built last year or 100 years ago. I approached the woman sitting by the window. She was perhaps 40, with brown hair gone grey at the temples and a dress that had once been fine but was now worn soft with age. "Excuse me," I said gently. "May I join you?" She looked up as if surprised to be addressed, then smiled vaguely and gestured to the empty chair. I sat. "Have you been here long?" I asked. She looked out the window at the rain. "I'm not sure," she said. "I was traveling to my sister's wedding. It was raining when I arrived, and the innkeeper said I should wait for it to clear. I thought it would only be a day or two." She paused, "But it never stops, you see. It just keeps raining. And I keep thinking, surely tomorrow it will clear. Surely tomorrow." "When was the wedding?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "June," she said. "June the 12th. She smiled. "She'll be so happy. She's marrying a baker from the next village. He makes the most wonderful bread." I nodded slowly. The way she spoke of it, present tense, future tense, never past, told me everything I needed to know. She was trapped here, in this moment, waiting for a tomorrow that would never come. I spoke with others as the evening wore on. The old man with the chessboard told me he was waiting for his son to arrive so they could travel home together. The two travelers by the wall said they were resting before continuing to the capital. Each of them spoke of their plans, their destinations, their tomorrows. None of them seemed to realize how long they'd been waiting. None except the innkeeper, who moved through the room like a ghost tending to other ghosts, his face growing more sorrowful with each passing hour. As night deepened, the guests began to retire to their rooms. I remained by the fire, and eventually the innkeeper came and sat in the chair across from me. For a long time, neither of us spoke. We just listened to the rain. "You see it, don't you?" he said finally. "What this place really is." "I see enough," I said. "You're keeping them here. All of them. Trapped." "Not trapped," he said softly. "Protected. The storm outside, it's not natural, it's not safe. As long as they stay here, as long as the rain continues, they're safe and warm and fed. They don't suffer. They don't fear. They just wait." "For what?" His hands tightened on the arms of his chair. "For me to let them go." And then slowly he told me his story. His name was Merim, and once, long ago, this valley had been green and thriving. He'd been the keeper of a small inn, a way station for travelers, nothing grand but honest and good. He'd had a wife, 3 children, friends, a life that fit him like comfortable clothes. Then came the drought. 3 years without rain. The crops failed, the river dwindled to a trickle, the earth cracked and split like old pottery. People began to leave, seeking greener lands. Those who remained grew thin and desperate. His wife fell ill from drinking bad water. His youngest daughter grew weak from hunger. Merim had prayed. He'd prayed to every god whose name he knew, to the spirits of the mountains, to the sky itself. He'd climbed to the highest peak in the valley and begged the heavens to send rain, to save his people, to let his family live. And something answered. Rain came. Not gradually, but all at once, a deluge that filled the river and soaked the earth and drummed on the roof like applause. Miriam wept with gratitude. His wife drank clear water and began to recover. The fields turned green again, but the rain didn't stop. Day after day, week after week, it poured. The river flooded. The crops rotted in the fields. The sun became a memory. And slowly, people began to leave again, not fleeing drought now, but fleeing an endless, drowning grey. Miriam's wife took the children and left, begging him to come with them. But he couldn't. He'd called the rain, he'd made the bargain, though he didn't remember making one, and he felt responsible. He stayed at his inn, taking in the few travellers who still passed through, waiting for the rain to end. But it never did. Years passed, the valley emptied, the roads grew over, and still Miriam stayed, and still travellers came, fewer and fewer, but they came. Except these travellers were different. They arrived out of the rain looking lost and confused, and when they tried to leave, they found they couldn't. The storm outside was too fierce, the path too dangerous. Just one more night, they'd say, just until it clears. I realized the truth too late, Miriam said, his voice barely above a whisper. I'd made a prison. My desperate wish for rain had twisted into something terrible. The rain wouldn't stop because I wouldn't let it. And these people, they're caught between worlds, not quite alive, not quite dead, just waiting for me to release them. Why don't you? I asked. He looked at me with eyes full of ancient pain. Because I'm afraid, he said simply. I'm afraid of what comes after. Afraid that if I let the rain stop, I'll have to face what I've done. I'll have to face the silence and the emptiness and the fact that everyone I loved is long gone. As long as the rain continues, as long as I have guests to care for, I have a purpose. I'm still the innkeeper. I'm still something. The fire crackled between us. Outside, the rain drummed its endless rhythm. Even kindness can become a prison, I said quietly, if we never let go. He closed his eyes. I know that. But knowing and doing are different countries, wizard, and the bridge between them is so very long. I sat back in my chair, thinking. I'd encountered curses before, broken spells, undone workings of twisted magic. But this was different. This wasn't a spell cast by some malevolent sorcerer. This was grief and guilt and love all tangled together, wound so tightly around Miriam's heart that they'd become chains. I sat with that story for a long time, feeling its weight. The fire had burned down to coals that glowed like dragon eyes in the darkness. And outside, the rain continued its steady, endless rhythm. May I walk through the inn? I asked finally. I'd like to understand this place better. Miriam nodded slowly. Of course. Though I warn you, there are rooms I haven't opened in years, decades perhaps. Time moves strangely here and I've stopped trying to measure it. He handed me a candle, one of the old tallow ones that smell of beeswax and smoke, and I left him sitting by the dying fire, staring into the embers as if searching for something he'd lost there long ago. The hallways of the inn were narrow and dark, lined with doors that all looked identical. I tried the first one and found a small room with a neatly made bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out onto the rain. The room felt empty in a way that went beyond physical absence. It was the emptiness of a place waiting to be filled, or perhaps a place that had given up waiting. I moved on to the next room, and the next. Each was similar, clean, prepared, untouched. Guest rooms that had never known guests, or had forgotten them so thoroughly that no trace remained. But the fourth door I tried was locked. I stood there for a moment, my hand on the cold brass handle, and felt something on the other side. Not a presence exactly, but an absence so profound it had weight. I pressed my ear to the wood and heard nothing, not even the rain, which should have been audible through the window. Curious, I murmured to myself, which is something I've learned wizards say quite often. It's a useful word. It means, I have no idea what's happening but don't want to admit it. I drew a small piece of chalk from my pocket. I always carry chalk, along with string, a smooth stone, and 3 dried acorns, because you never know when you'll need to draw a circle of protection or feed a particularly insistent squirrel, and traced a simple sigil on the door. Just a small working, a gentle question asked of the wooden lock. What are you keeping in or keeping out? The sigil glowed faintly blue for a moment, then faded. But in that brief illumination, I saw something. Not with my eyes, but with the part of me that perceives things beyond the usual senses. Behind that door wasn't a room at all. It was a threshold, a thin place where this world pressed against something else. I tried the handle again, more firmly this time, and it opened. The room beyond was wrong in ways that are difficult to describe. It had the same furniture as the other rooms, bed, washstand, window, but the proportions were off. The ceiling was too high, or perhaps the floor was too low. The window showed rain, but the rain fell upward as often as down, drops suspended in mid-air like trapped moths. And in the center of the room, sitting on the edge of the bed, was a child. She was perhaps 8 or 9 years old, with dark hair and a grey dress that might have been white once, a very long time ago. She sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, staring at the impossible rain beyond the window. She didn't acknowledge my presence, didn't turn when I entered. "Hello," I said softly, keeping my voice gentle. Children and magic are a delicate combination, and I've learned to tread carefully around both. She didn't respond, but I saw her hands tighten slightly in her lap. I came closer, moving slowly, and sat in the chair by the washstand. "My name is..." I paused, considering. Names have power, especially in places like this, and I wasn't certain what rules governed this room. "You can call me the wizard," I finished. "May I ask your name?" For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, in a voice like wind through hollow reeds, she whispered, "I don't remember." "That's all right," I said. "Names are slippery things anyway, always wandering off when you need them most. I once forgot my own name for 3 whole days and had to introduce myself as the fellow in the blue hat until I remembered." The corner of her mouth might have twitched, or it might have been a shadow from my candle. It was hard to tell. "Are you staying at the inn?" I asked. "I don't know," she said. I think I've been here a long time, longer than the others. I was here before the rain, I think, or maybe I came with it. It's hard to remember." I looked around the room again, at the way reality seemed to bend at the edges. "This is a special room, isn't it? Different from the others." "This is the first room," she said, still not looking at me. "The first one he made." After what?" "After he called and something answered." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. "Are you part of the answer?" I asked carefully. "Part of what came with the rain?" She finally turned to look at me, and her eyes were the grey of storm clouds, the grey of forgetting, the grey of things lost between worlds. "I don't know what I am anymore," she said. "I was someone once. I had a mother and a father and a little dog named Copper. I was traveling with them when the rain started. Real rain, the kind that saves things. My father was so happy. He said the drought was over, that everything would be all right now." She looked back at the window, but the rain didn't stop. It got darker and colder, and our cart got stuck in the mud. My father went for help and never came back. My mother held me and told me stories until she stopped being warm. And then the rain itself reached down and pulled me somewhere else, somewhere between the rain and the world. And I've been here ever since, watching the innkeeper collect travelers like a child collecting rainwater in cups, never knowing when to stop. My throat felt tight. "How long have you been in this room?" "Long enough to forget my name," she said. "Long enough to become part of the walls. Sometimes I think I am this room. Sometimes I think this room is a memory the inn is having of me. It's hard to tell the difference anymore." I stood and moved to the window, looking out at the rain that fell in directions rain should never fall. "The innkeeper, Merim, he doesn't know you're here, does he?" "He knows," she said quietly, "but he can't look. If he looked, if he really saw what he'd made, it would break him. So he locks the door and tries not to remember. But I'm still here. I'm always here. The first one caught. The deepest one trapped." I turned back to her. "What do you want? If you could have anything, what would it be?" She thought about this for a long time, her small hands twisting in her lap. When she spoke, her voice was so soft I had to lean in to hear it. "I want to finish dying," she said, "or finish living. Whichever I was doing when the rain caught me, I just want to finish." The candle in my hand flickered, and I realized my hand was shaking. I'd broken curses before, dispelled hauntings, sent restless spirits to their rest. But this was more complicated. This child, this echo, this memory, this piece of a soul caught like a fly in amber. She was woven into the very foundation of this place. To free her might bring the entire structure crashing down. But then, perhaps, that was what needed to happen. "I'm going to help you," I said. "I'm going to help all of you. But I need you to do something for me." "What?" "When the time comes, and you'll know when it comes, I need you to sing. Can you do that? Can you remember any songs?" She tilted her head, thinking. "My mother used to sing to me when I couldn't sleep. A song about stars and rivers and finding your way home in the dark." "That sounds perfect," I said. "When you feel the moment arriving, sing that song. Sing it as loud as you can. Will you do that for me?" She nodded slowly, and for the first time, something like hope flickered in those grey eyes. I left her there and closed the door gently behind me. The lock clicked with a sound like a sigh. I stood in the hallway for a moment, steadying myself, then continued my exploration of the inn. I found other strange things as I wandered. A room where water pooled on the floor despite there being no leak. A room where the walls were covered in tally marks, thousands of them, as if someone had been counting days or perhaps trying to count their way back to sanity. A room where the air smelled of bread baking and I could hear faintly a woman humming a lullaby that made my chest ache with homesickness for a home I'd never had. Each room was a pocket of trapped time, a moment of hope or despair or simple human need that had become frozen, preserved in the amber of endless rain. But the strangest room was the last one at the end of the longest hallway. The door wasn't locked, but it took effort to open, as if the air pressure on the other side was different. When I finally pushed through, I found myself in what must have been Merim's own room. It was sparse. A narrow bed, a chest for clothes, a small table with a chair. But the walls were covered in writing. Every inch of every wall was filled with words scratched into the wood with what must have been a knife or a nail. They weren't sentences exactly, more like fragments, thoughts, confessions carved into the walls like prayers or curses. I stepped closer, holding my candle up to read them. "I didn't mean this. Please forgive me. I only wanted to save them. How do I stop? I can hear it singing. Why won't anyone leave? I miss my wife. I miss my children. I miss the sun. 30 years, 50, 100. I don't remember their faces anymore. What have I become? I'm so tired. Please let it end. But I'm afraid, so afraid, of the silence after." The words spiraled around the room, getting smaller and more frantic near the ceiling, as if he'd stood on a chair to scratch them there, running out of space for his despair. In one corner, I found a single phrase repeated over and over until the letters overlapped into meaninglessness. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I stood in the center of that room, surrounded by decades or centuries of guilt and grief made visible, and felt something in my chest crack open. This wasn't just a curse. This was a man who'd turned himself inside out with remorse, who'd built a prison from his own heart and locked himself inside it. I closed my eyes and reached out with my other senses, the ones that perceive the flows and currents of magic. The inn thrummed with power, not the clean, purposeful power of worked spells, but the raw, tangled power of emotion, transmuted into something half alive. Regret and love and fear all wound together like tree roots, anchoring this place between worlds. And underneath it all, like a bass note in a symphony, I felt the rain. Not just the physical rain, but the spirit of it. The entity that had answered Merrim's desperate prayer. It was vast and ancient and utterly inhuman, but not malevolent. It had come because it was called. It had stayed because it was bound. And now it waited, patient as only weather can be patient, for release. But there was something else too. A third presence woven through it all, young and old at once, remembered and forgotten. The first caught and the deepest trapped. The child in the locked room. She wasn't just a victim of this place. She was part of its foundation. The first stone in a prison that had grown room by room, guest by guest, year by year. To break the curse, I would need to free her first. And to free her, I would need Merrim to do something he'd been avoiding for all these years. Look directly at what he'd done. Not just acknowledge it in the abstract, but really see it, feel it, accept it. That was going to be difficult. People will do almost anything to avoid looking at the worst parts of themselves. We're very creative when it comes to building walls between our actions and our awareness of those actions. I should know. I've built a few myself over the years. I left his room and made my way back down to the common room. Merrim was still there, exactly where I'd left him, staring at the embers. He looked up when I entered, and I saw the question in his eyes. "It's worse than you told me," I said, sitting down across from him. He flinched but didn't ask what I meant. He already knew. "There's a child," I said gently, "in one of the locked rooms. A little girl who doesn't remember her name." His face went pale. "I know," he whispered. "She was the first one I couldn't save, the first one the rain took. I tried to forget her. I've tried so hard to forget. But she's always there behind that door, and His voice broke. "I can't look. If I look at her, if I see what I did, what my prayer created, You'll break," I finished. "I know. But sometimes, Merrim, breaking is the only way to let the light in." He shook his head, tears streaming down his face. "I'm not strong enough." "Then we'll be strong enough together," I said. "But you have to choose it. I can't force this. The magic here is bound up in your will, your guilt, your refusal to let go. Only you can untangle it." He sat there, trembling, warring with himself. I waited. That's most of what wizardry is, really, knowing when to act and when to wait, the balance between pushing and patience. Finally, he spoke. "What do I have to do?" "First," I said, "we go to that room, together, and you look, really look. Then we go outside and you speak to the rain itself, to the spirit you bound with your need. You release it, and you release yourself, and you release all the souls you've been keeping safe in your guilt. And the child?" "She'll sing," I said. "She'll sing herself free, but only if you give her permission to leave. He nodded, wiping his face with shaking hands. "All right," he said. "All right. But not yet. Give me tonight. Let me say goodbye to this place, to these guests, to the person I've been for so long. Tomorrow, at dawn, if dawn ever comes again, I'll do it." I considered arguing, but then I looked at his face and saw that he needed this. One last night as the innkeeper, one last evening of purpose before stepping into the unknown. "Tomorrow then," I agreed. "At dawn." We sat together in silence as the fire died completely, leaving only darkness and the endless sound of rain. And somewhere, far above us in a locked room, a child who'd forgotten her name sat on the edge of a bed and tried to remember the words to a song about stars and rivers and finding your way home in the dark. "There's something else," I said. "Something you're not telling me." He opened his eyes and looked at the rain-streaked window. "If you listen," he said, "really listen to the rain, sometimes you can hear it. A voice, singing." I stood and went to the window, pressing my palm against the cold glass. At first I heard only rain, the familiar patter and drum. But then, underneath it, woven through it, I heard something else. A voice, wordless but clear, singing a melody that was both beautiful and unbearably sad. "What is it?" I asked. "The first storm," Merrim said, "or the spirit of it, perhaps. The thing that answered my prayer. It's been singing for years, and I think it's waiting." "For what?" "For forgiveness," he said. "I cursed it with my need, trapped it here just as surely as it trapped me. We're bound together, the storm and I. Neither of us can rest until the other lets go." I turned from the window and looked at this man who had made himself into a cage. "Then it's time," I said. "Time to forgive yourself. Time to forgive the rain. Time to let your guests find their own tomorrows." "I don't know how," he whispered. "Yes, you do," I said. "You've always known. You're just afraid to do it." He sat in silence for a long moment, then slowly rose. He looked around the common room, at the dying fire, at the empty chairs, at the windows streaming with endless rain. "Will you help me?" he asked. "Of course," I said. We walked together to the door. Merrim's hand hesitated on the handle, trembling slightly. Then he pulled it open. The rain roared in, wild and fierce, and the singing voice rose with it, filling the air with its wordless grief and longing. Merrim stepped out into the storm, and I followed. The rain soaked us immediately, but it felt different than before. It felt alive, aware, like we were standing in the presence of something vast and sorrowful. Merrim raised his face to the sky and spoke, his voice somehow carrying over the storm. "I release you," he said. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry I bound you to my pain. I'm sorry I couldn't let go, but I release you now. Be free." For a moment, nothing changed. The rain continued to fall, hard and cold. Then Merrim said, quieter now, "And I release myself." Something shifted. The singing voice rose higher, became a sound of pure, crystalline joy, and then faded away like an exhaled breath. The rain began to lessen, not stopping all at once, but gently, gradually, the way rain should end, easing from downpour to shower, from shower to drizzle, from drizzle to a soft mist that hung in the air like a blessing. And then, for the first time in decades, or perhaps centuries, the rain stopped. The silence was profound. We stood there, soaked through, staring up at the sky. Clouds still covered the stars, but they were moving now, drifting slowly eastward, breaking apart into pieces. Behind us, I heard sounds from the inn. Voices, confused and wondering. The guests were waking from their long dream. Through the open door, I saw the woman who'd been waiting for her sister's wedding stand and look around as if seeing the room for the first time. The old man with the chest set rose slowly, touching his face, his hands, as if confirming he was real. They began to leave one by one, walking out into the night, not fleeing, just leaving, going home, or to whatever came next. They passed by Merrim and me without seeming to see us, but several smiled as they went, as if remembering something sweet and distant. Merrim watched them go with tears streaming down his face, mixing with the rain that still dripped from his hair. "Thank you," he whispered. "You did it yourself," I said. "I just stood with you." We went back inside. The inn felt different now, lighter somehow, as if a great weight had been lifted from its beams. The fire had gone out, and morning light was beginning to seep through the windows. Pale, tentative light, the kind that seems unsure if it's really welcome. But it was morning, real morning, for the first time in so long. I gathered my things while Merrim stood at the window, watching the sky slowly brighten. When I came back downstairs, my cloak over my arm, he turned to me. "What will you do now?" I asked. He smiled, a real smile, sad but genuine. "I think I'll sleep," he said. "I'm very, very tired. And then, I don't know, perhaps I'll finally walk down that road. Perhaps I'll see what the world has become. Perhaps I'll just sit here and watch the sun rise over and over until I've made up for all the mornings I missed." "All good choices," I said. He walked me to the door. Outside, the valley was emerging from mist like a painting slowly coming into focus. The trees dripped softly. Birds were beginning to sing, tentative at first, then with growing confidence. "Wizard," Merrim said as I stepped outside. "Will you tell people about this place?" I considered. "No," I said. "Some stories are meant to stay quiet, but I'll remember it, and I'll remember you." He nodded, satisfied, and began to close the door. Then he paused. "The rain," he said. "Do you think it's really gone?" I looked up at the sky, where the clouds were breaking apart to reveal patches of deep blue. "Yes," I said. "I think it found what it was looking for. Same as you." He smiled once more and closed the door. I walked down the muddy path, which was becoming clearer with each step, as if the world was deciding to remember it again. After about an hour, I turned to look back. The inn was barely visible through the trees, just a suggestion of stone and wood and smoke from a newly lit fire. And then I walked on, and when I looked back again, I couldn't see it at all. I've thought about Merrim often over the years, wondered if he ever left that valley, or if he stayed to greet the first new traveler who came down that forgotten road. Wondered if rain ever fell there again, and if it did, whether it fell naturally the way rain should, temporary, cleansing, then gone. But mostly I think about what he taught me that night, that sometimes we hold on to things, grief, guilt, even love, long past the time when they serve us. We make cages out of our own pain and call them homes. We trap ourselves in endless storms of our own making, always waiting for permission to step into the sun. The world is full of rain, my friend. Some of it is beautiful, some of it is necessary, and some of it needs to end so that something else can grow. The trick is knowing which is which, and having the courage to stand in the storm and say, "Enough, I release you, I release myself." But that's quite enough philosophy for one night, I think. The fire's burning low, and morning isn't so far away as all that. Rest now. Let the story settle into your bones like warmth, like rain soaking into thirsty earth. And if you dream of rain tonight, don't worry. It's only the sky remembering how to let go. Sleep well, my friend. Sleep well.